Hi everyone. Trust you're keeping well and safe. I know it's been quite some time since I got here to share God's word with you, but nonetheless, I am here right now. I'm here today and I'm ready to share with you a few things that the Lord laid in my heart. So I hope you're ready for God's word. All right, without further ado, let's get into the topic today. So, today I would like to talk to you on the topic of the God of strategy and me. The God of strategy and me. So, before we get into the biblical side of things, let's get the definition out of the way so we are all clear, we're on the same page with regards to what strategy is. Okay, so what is strategy? In a secular sense, a strategy would be a plan of action designed to achieve a long term or an overall aim. A plan of action designed to achieve a long term or an overall aim. So, in other words, a strategy is a detailed plan that will help you to get from point A to point B, to move from one destination and travel to reach another destination. So basically, it gets you from one place to another. This is basically what a strategy does. It gives you a plan, direction in how to get to your target or your goals. Now, beloved, for the purpose of our message today, I want to talk about this area of strategy specifically in relation to God through a very well known and well loved biblical character, and that is Joseph. We're going to look at this through the life of Joseph. Now, beloved, when we talk about our God, you need to know that our God is a very well detailed oriented God. He's specific, he's detailed, he's conscientious, he's well organized, he's well prepared. He's a God of strategy. He knows what he's doing, he knows how to execute his plans as well. That is who our God is. And if you look at the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, you will find a plethora of strategies, plenty, numerous of strategies that God used to establish his purpose and will, the sovereign will and purpose of God on this earth, as well as individual strategies that he used for specific individuals to accomplish his purpose and will in their lives as well. So you see tons of strategies that God used right throughout the scriptures. All right, so for the purpose of our message today, I will only be focusing on the strategy aspect through the life of Joseph. So I hope you're ready for it. Okay, so we'll be looking at three levels of strategy to start off with. So the first level is God's strategy. God's strategy. Now, those of you who know the story of Joseph, you know that this young lad was a young boy when this happened to him. Was not an easy life. He went through so much of trials, turbulence, difficult situations. Starting off with him, his brothers rather, disowning him. They got jealous of him. They discredited him. Then they sold him as a slave to foreign traders, and he was removed from his home against his will. He was removed from his family, from his loved ones, from his country, from his comfort zone, and was packed to a foreign land, and he had to grow up as a slave. And this was a lot for a young lad to go through. The betrayal of his own family, the family rejecting and disowning him, particularly the brothers. The father had no idea what had happened. His parents had no idea. So there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt, and this young man had to grow up with this. A very, very difficult situation for a young person to be in. But that's how he started. And it doesn't get better after that. So now he's in a foreign land, so he had to get accustomed to these foreign ways, and he was living there as a slave, Hebrew slave. And now he finds himself a good job, but unfortunately, in his job, he was the master of the house for Potiphar. Unfortunately, Potiphar's wife took a lustful liking to him, and she tried to seduce him. So he did the right thing, and he was right standing, and he didn't give in to it. And because he did the right thing, he took the right stand for God, he was thrown into prison for doing the right thing. All right, I mean, look at the difficulty of his life and how many things happened multiple times. Repetitively, this cycle of difficulty, trials was going on and on in his life for a long time. And then he was thrown in prison, and then he was forgotten in prison. So this man went through a lot, And humanly, when we look at it, it's not an easy life. It's not an easy path that he had to walk. But when you look at it through the perspective of God, through the eyes of God, you see something called divine strategy, beloved. You see how God divinely orchestrated, aligned these very grueling, tiring, difficult situations in the path of Joseph. He aligned these in his life for a purpose. You see God's hand in it. You see God's strategy, the timing of it, the orchestration of all these events, the sequence of all these events is not coincidence. There was divine purpose in it. And because Joseph faithfully went through it and he endured it, God brought great elevation and promotion into his life. Because if you read Genesis 41:39 to 40, you will find out what God did for him. So he went through all of this, and finally, what did God do? He rewarded him richly. Joseph became the second in command, or in our terms would be something like a prime minister in the land of Egypt. And the land of Egypt was a very, very powerful country at the time. So a very powerful nation, rich, prosperous. And this guy, mind you, was a Hebrew. He was a foreigner. He was a slave. And he was in the lower strata in society. And from this lower strata, from prison, suddenly now he's ending up in the presidential house or the king's palace and holding such a position. How is this possible? You tell me. How is this humanly possible? Is this logically humanly possible? It's not. He didn't have training on how to be the second in command. No. What background, what connection did he have? Nothing. But he followed God's strategy. And what was impossible with man became a possibility with God for Joseph, because he endured that difficult time, the strategies that the Lord laid for him. Okay, so that there we see God's strategy. Now, for those of you who may be watching this and you may be going through a very difficult time in life, maybe you're trying to navigate through a rough patch in life, maybe you're trying to figure out God's will for your life or a certain area of your life. If you're someone like that, I have one tip for you. Okay, one tip for you with regards to this, and that is found in Genesis 40, verse 5. Let's go to Genesis 45. I will read it for you. Each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. So, for those of you who don't know, I will quickly explain what happened here. So now Joseph was thrown in prison, and during this time, the cupbearer and the baker who served in the king's palace were also thrown in prison. So both of these men were in prison at the same time. And at the same time, both of these guys saw prophetic dreams. In content, it was different what they saw, but in essence, it was the same because it was both prophetic. It was both telling them about future events that are going to happen, so very highly prophetic in nature. And it happened at the same time. At the time, both of them were thrown in the same prison that Joseph was in. All right, and then Joseph encountered them, and he explained the dreams to them. So look at the timing of this. Look at the word same. NIV uses the word same. Same night. They had the dreams the same night. Prophetic dreams, same night. Now, is this humanly plausible? Is this humanly possible? What are the odds of this happening humanly? Simple example, let's take a husband and wife who share a marital bed. So you know each other intimately well, right? But even though you sleep next to each other and you know each other very well, what are the odds of you seeing the same dream that your spouse sees? Okay, or something very similar. Let's say you have a prophetic dream or a vision and your spouse also sees something in a sense that at the same time. What are the odds of that happening? Is that natural? Is that normal? The odds of that happening are very, very slim in our day and age in this realm. But it happened here to these two men who were obviously not related. But it happened. What does that show you, beloved? It shows you something on timing. It shows you about God's timing and alignment. When God's time comes, there will be alignment. So if you are going through a difficult patch or you're trying to navigate through a season of uncertainty and doubt, I will encourage you to prayerfully discern timing. What timing? God's timing. See if you can discern what God is doing, right? Specifically in terms of timing, see if there is alignment. For example, what are the odds of me meeting this person at this point of time? Could this have happened naturally? Or what are the odds of this happening? What are the odds of this opportunity coming my way? What are the odds of this door closing in my life? What are the odds? How naturally feasible is this? Just some things to think through, because if you can understand or you can discern God's timing and alignment with that timing, how God aligns things, you will have a sense of God's direction for your life or what He's doing in that season of life. You may not get the whole picture, but you may have an idea of where God's heart is or His direction, and that hint you will get if you can discern time of God, right? So this situation shows us that there was divine alignment, there was divine timing, right? And also I believe Joseph had a sense of this. That is why once he interpreted the cupbearer's dream, he tells the cupbearer, now when you're released from prison, remember me, okay? Remember me, tell Pharaoh about my story. Because this man had a sense that there is something of God in this. He knew he's going to be released, and he knew the cupbearer was going to go into a place that he won't be going anytime soon, to the king's palace. So he had a sense. He discerned that there was something here, right? And Joseph stepped in and did what he had to do. So that's something I want to leave with you and encourage those of you who might be going through a season like that. Try to discern timing, alignment in that timing, okay? Right, so let's quickly move on to our second point, which is man's strategy. Man's strategy. Now, if you read the narrative of Genesis 41 verses 25 to 36, you see this instance that I'm talking to you about, right? So now the cupbearer, remember the cupbearer? He was released and now he was reinstated as the cupbearer, and the Pharaoh conveniently forgot about Joseph. And he never mentioned a word to the Pharaoh about Joseph. So 2 years went by and suddenly the Pharaoh had a dream and nobody in the palace could interpret this. Now the cupbearer suddenly remembered, oh, Joseph is the guy, he can crack this. So he tells Pharaoh, and Pharaoh immediately summons Joseph, and Joseph beautifully, wonderfully, accurately interprets the dreams that Pharaoh had. And he could have stopped there, right? But he didn't. He went beyond, right? So he interpreted the dreams and he told Pharaoh, look, Pharaoh, 7 years of abundance you're going to have in the land. Everyone is going to be very happy. Everything's going to be pickety-boo. Everything's going to be great. But after these 7 years, the next 7 years are going to be very challenging because the land will be faced with severe famine. And you won't know what to do even either at that time. So this was the dream. And this was his job. This is what Pharaoh asked him to do, to come and say that. But he didn't stop there, beloved. He didn't stop there. He goes a step further, and he gives a strategy to Pharaoh in terms of how Pharaoh can handle this. Okay? Now, this was not what he was summoned. He was summoned to just interpret the dreams. He wasn't called to give advice to the Pharaoh, right? But he goes a step further. So I will just quickly read to you Genesis 41, 33 to 36, so you can see the strategy he gave Pharaoh, right? Let me quickly read that for you. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. There you go. He tells Pharaoh how to handle the situation as well. This was not called for. He was only asked to interpret the dreams. What does this show us, beloved? Joseph executed a much needed strategy at the time. Okay? He not only uses his gift of interpreting dreams, But he goes a step further and he discerns that there is a need here. Pharaoh needs to know what to do with this information that I told him about the dreams, right? And then he uses his other gift of discernment and wisdom to tell Pharaoh, hey, Pharaoh, this is what you got to do with the information I just gave you now. Strategy. That was strategy. For the situation he was presented with, he applied divine strategy. And what was the strategy he used? His relationship with God. So he was a man who was depending on God very much. So through that relationship, he had confidence, he had boldness, and then he tapped into his spiritual gifts, right? And what were his spiritual gifts? The gift of interpreting dreams, discernment, and wisdom. So he used those gifts to navigate through this challenge, this situation that he was presented with. So you have the relationship and the gifts coming together in Joseph's strategy. Okay, so that was his strategy. That's how he faced this situation that he was presented with. So there you see man's strategy, because Joseph played a predominant role here, right? He drew from his walk with God, and he drew from his gifts as well. So it's important for us as children of God, if you're listening, to know what your gifts are, what your spiritual gifts are, because spiritual gifts are given predominantly for ministry to serve, but also the gifts you have can help you navigate through challenging times as well. It can help you as well, right? But you just need to know how and when to use it. All right. Okay, very quickly, my final point. I'm done in a few minutes. The final point for today is the partnership between God's and man's strategy. The partnership between God's and man's strategy. Third level of strategy. Now, we already discussed God's strategy here, and it was a difficult one in human terms, what Joseph had to go through, but that was strategically ordained by God. Now, Joseph was facing this, right? How did Joseph face this strategy of God? How did he respond to it? If you look at the life of Joseph, if you study the life of Joseph, beloved, you will see that Joseph was actually a picture of Jesus. He was an example of, a prophetic example of Jesus in the New Testament, because he was such a man of righteousness. He was right standing before God. He was very passionate about God. Even in trying situations, you never see Joseph blaming God, scolding God, running away from God, following a prodigal son lifestyle. No, you don't see him doing that. He has every reason to do that because of what he went through repetitively, but he never does that. He never does that. His passion for God remains the same. His love for God remains the same. His commitment, his zeal, his values in God remains the same. Right? His thoughts towards God remains the same. His character, his essence, his principles in life remains the same. This man was always the same in spirit, in his essence, in his core, in his character. There was spiritual stability. There was stability in the persona of him. Always he had it. It never changed. It never changed with the circumstances, the trials that he was going through. That never changed. So how did Joseph respond to the strategies of God? Stability. He had spiritual stability, and he had character. He had good character that he was able to withstand. He didn't change. His relationship with God didn't change. His desire for God, the fear of God, the reverence for God, nothing changed. Nothing changed. Even when things made absolutely no sense, nothing changed. That was his strategy. So he used that strategy. And so here we see a beautiful partnership between God's strategy and man's strategy coming together in perfect harmonization, in perfect synchronization. And at the end of it, who benefited from it? Joseph, because he received something that was extremely rare and unheard of, that God uniquely did only for him during this time, to become the second in command in Egypt. And he was a highly favored, highly successful man, highly prosperous man. And that is only God. Why? Because Joseph knew how to respond to the strategy of God, and that is with stability. He didn't change. His walk with God never change. His heart towards God never changed. His thoughts towards God never changed. His dependency on God never changed. So, finally, I would like to encourage anyone who's watching this message with this thought. If you are in this type of a situation, you're going through a lot right now, you're trying to discern God's will, or multiple challenges you might be facing right now in your life, or you've been going through right now, just one thing I want to tell you, beloved: do not give up. Do not give up on your God. Do not give up on yourself. Be encouraged and depend on Him more. Depend on Him more. Okay? Depend on your walk with God more, your relationship with Him more. Depend on Him. Spend more time with Him. Read His Word. Depend more on Him. And as the Lord leads, don't be afraid to use your gifts. Use your spiritual gifts when you have to, when you need to navigate through these situations that you are going through, because our God is so good. And even though He allows us to go through difficult situations, He will never let you struggle in it alone. He will send support. He would have given things inside of you, resources, gifts inside of you that you can use during this time. Or it could be external things that He will bring, support to help you. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to let you struggle on your own. It may feel like it at times, but if you really discern, God has given you everything you need to navigate through your challenge and this trial that you're going through, the turbulent times you're going through. So don't ever give up. Be discerning, and walk closely with God. And He will definitely get you through. And not just get you through, but give you the best that He has in store for you. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to conclude this message. So thank you very much for joining with me and for spending your valuable time and for listening to this message. I hope this message touched you or encouraged you or you learned something new. So this is it from me for today. So until I see you again, stay safe, stay well, and walk strong with the Lord. Loads of love to you all. May God bless you. Goodbye.